If you remember a few months back, I did a review of the ASUS ROG Strix XG43UQ monitor, which was a 43-inch 4K monitor with a 120Hz refresh rate. So it was a very nice gaming panel for both PC gamers and console gamers alike. But at CES this January, ASUS showed us its high-end younger brother that is even faster and even brighter. So here I have ASUS ROG Swift PG43UQ that has the same size and the same resolution. So it's a 43-inch VA panel with a 4K resolution, but it has 144Hz refresh rate instead of 120. And this time, due to the display stream compression, it shouldn't lose any image quality at this speed. It is officially FreeSync and G-Sync compatible, and it has a display HDR 1000 certificate instead of the 600 that the previous model had. The price is also slightly different, and it stands at 1,500 euros or 1,500 US dollars. So I'm really excited to check this monitor out and see if it's worth spending so much money on. So without further ado, let's begin. This video is brought to you by Cooler Master and their MM711 Ultra Light Gaming Mouse. With the top optical sensor, solid Omron switches, beautiful RGB and a weight of only 60 grams, the MM711 is a great mouse for serious gamers and all-around users alike. Check it out using the links in the description below. Okay, make no mistake here, 43-inch doesn't really sound that big considering the size of TVs these days, but you should definitely measure your desk before you consider buying a monitor of this size. It's about 97 centimeters wide and 64 centimeters tall. The stand itself is not that deep at 25 centimeters, so thankfully it will not take up your whole desk. The design is the same as on the XG43UQ, so it's a flat panel with fairly typical bezels and very little going on in the front. And in the back we see the typical ROG lines and the logo. Overall build quality is pretty good, especially considering the size of this thing. The solid metal stand is still very well done and stability is not really an issue, but it doesn't offer much in terms of movement. The display can be tilted about 15 degrees, but there is no swivel, height adjustment, or any rotation. Now, if you want, you can VESA mount it to the wall or a heavy-duty monitor arm instead. Connections are pretty good here as well. There are two DisplayPort 1.4 connections, two HDMI 2.0 connections, there is an analog in and out too, as well as a USB hub. The little ROG logo projector also makes a return. Now normally you would install it in the back and let it project right under the monitor. But you can also point it anywhere you want, just, don't expect it to light up a ceiling in a lit room. This monitor also comes with built-in speakers, and I have to say the quality of the speakers is pretty decent. I just wish they had a bit more volume, especially if you want to use this monitor at a distance. As usual with ASUS, OSD controls are excellent. The menus make sense and it's very easy to navigate with a little joystick and the buttons. As we've come to expect, there are typical crosshair and shadow boost features, as well as other features to enhance your gaming experience. This monitor also comes with a full software control over the OSD, which is another great feature we've been seeing more recently. So you can just change settings with your mouse, and you can now make profiles that you can easily swap between using hotkeys. They also included a remote for those of you considering it for a TV alternative. Just keep in mind there is no actual TV functionality, but you can use it to swap between inputs or change the volume. Okay, so let's talk experience before we jump into pure results. And like with any other large monitor, you really need to consider the size of this thing. On one hand, because of the size, you can get that really nice immersive gaming experience. But if you sit too close to it, you will end up moving your eyes too much to, pick up everything going on the screen. So this monitor will never be for competitive gaming. And then at the end of the day, it's not going to matter if the monitor has 60 Hz or 300 Hz. If your eyes are trying to figure out what's going on, you will never be as competitive as you want to be. However, on the other hand, if you like to sit back, lift your feet up, grab a controller and play any PC game or console game you like, the size of this thing is going to become a pure positive thing. So there's no really right or wrong answer here. It completely depends on your situation and on the types of games you like to play. So if you're not gonna get this monitor for competitive gaming, why would you consider getting a monitor like this? And one of the answers here should be the HDR experience, because this is one of the very rare monitors on the market that have the HDR 1000 label. I mean, the amount of light coming out of this monitor is just extraordinary. Even in the SDR mode, the brightness of this thing is close to 900 nits, and that is enough to justify wearing sunglasses at home. I mean, other than trying to be cool or something. The combination of the large display, 4K resolution, and that extreme brightness is unmatched by almost every other monitor on the market. The same goes for movies with HDR. It just looks really damn good. The experience is clearly an upgrade over the HDR 600 on the previous model, and the only monitors I've seen that did HDR better were the PG43UQ and the PA32UCX, both being considerably more expensive. That being said, the HDR is also not perfect, as this monitor doesn't have a full array local dimming backlight. To meet the display HDR 1000 requirement, ASUS is dimming the edge LEDs on the top and on the bottom in 8 zones per edge. Now that helps to increase contrast a bit, but obviously the contrast isn't as extreme as the PG43UQ and the PA32UCX that have full arrays of LEDs behind the panel. ASUS is using a pretty good VA panel here with good contrast, good colors, and decent black levels, but full array local dimming and OLED monitors do a better job at displaying deep blacks. But on the other side, you don't have to deal with halo effects that occur in full array local dimming displays. And remember that OLED also isn't perfect, as typical OLEDs don't really reach the same sustained brightness as this one, and there is always the fright of a burn-in. Another difference between the OLED TVs and this monitor is that almost all OLED TVs, as far as I know, are glossy, while this monitor has a nice matte finish. Now, glossiness does help the color pop a bit and look a bit nicer, but it's a real pain if you have to deal with reflections. So, if you have to deal with reflections on a daily basis and you have those naughty sun rays coming in and hitting your monitor, then a matte monitor like this is a better choice. Since ASUS is using a VA panel here, it isn't the fastest display on the market as expected. Technically, they're claiming a 1 millisecond moving picture response time, but even in maximum overdrive mode, using a 1000 FPS recording, there is definitely still some motion blur visible in fast-moving objects. Now you can enable the anti-motion blur ELMB option, but that does lower the brightness and prevents you from using both variable refresh rate and HDR, so it's not really ideal either. If you really care about every millisecond out there, you're just way better off buying a 27-inch or 25-inch IPS or a TN alternative that are currently on the market. What is actually way more important from a practical perspective is that input lag seems to be non-existent, and that this monitor offers variable refresh rate for both NVIDIA and AMD GPUs. While the previous model only had a FreeSync certificate, this one actually has both FreeSync and G-Sync, so you shouldn't have any problems at all. If you're using an RTX 2080 Ti, for example, you are guaranteed to have that 60 frames per second in most games out there and have a nice and clear and smooth gaming experience. But if you're using a lower graphics card like an RTX 2070 Super or an RX 5700 XT, they will really benefit from those sync options. That being said, if you drop under 48 frames per second, you will lose the sync. So make sure you tweak your settings in a way that you get close to 60 frames per second or around it to guarantee that continuous smoothness. So let's go over a couple of standard results to see how the panel comes out of the factory. Now, as I said, the brightness is definitely something that this monitor really stands out in, both in and out of HDR mode. The flip side is that at lowest settings, the brightness is still fairly high, which is not really problematic unless you're a user who is really fanatic about turning brightness down to a minimum. Even though it's a large panel with a lot of light, since it's a traditional LED backlight, the power consumption isn't that bad, and that also means there is no active cooling needed. Contrast is great for a VA panel at 3805:1. Factory gamma is fine, and the white point is pretty close to daylight. Color calibration in the default racing mode is decent. It's pretty much in the middle in both average and peak deviations. The sRGB mode is actually calibrated almost perfectly, but ASUS logs the brightness there to roughly 200 nits, so you lose some flexibility in that mode. Uniformity is pretty good as well, not exceptional, but not bad in any way either. You also see that one looking for backlight bleed. There is nothing there worth talking about, and the image looks pretty uniform subjectively as well. The same goes for viewing angles that are pretty good overall. They're not quite top level IPS, but they are completely fine. A really nice change from the previous model is that the image outside of games is good as well. Now, the XG never looked quite right in applications like Photoshop, due to the panel being upside down, so it was BGR instead of RGB, but this model looks sharp, even with small fonts and details in creative apps right out of the box. Combined with the test results, that means that nothing stops you from using this panel outside of games as well, for serious creative tasks, for example. So that about covers it for the PG43UQ, and I have to say it's a very, very interesting monitor. From a technical point of view, it's really good to see the DSC bringing 4K and 144 Hz together without losing image quality, like we've seen on some previous monitors, and it's really good to see the HDR 1000 label because, well, that is how HDR is supposed to look like. Now, ASUS also did a great job with overall things, so the build quality is fantastic, the details are really nice, there are so many gaming options as well as other options to tweak your monitor to your liking, and I have to say I personally really like the software-controlled OSD. It's not ultimate though, it is lacking the impressive full-array local dimming from the PG43UQ, and not being quite as fast as the recent 144p IPS and TN panels. But the things it promises, it does really well, and it has an image quality that you can use for gaming and everything else alike. So the big question is a monitor like this for you? Because it's going to be too big for competitive gaming, and it's just going to be too big for most desks out there. But if you like to sit back a bit and enjoy some immersive gaming, then this monitor is definitely an interesting option, especially if you want to connect your PC and your consoles to it. Now, on the market, there is little competition from other monitors, but if you look at some OLED TVs, there is definitely some competition there. Now, for example, new LG OLED TVs offer almost no input lag. They run at 120 Hz refresh rate, and they even offer G-Sync. So if you take a 55-inch TV, for example, it will cost you the same, it will be bigger, and it will offer better contrast and better black values. But if 55 inch is just too big for you and you prefer a matte finish over a glossy one and you're just very worried about OLED burn-in, then this monitor is definitely something for you. And I would say it's worth paying a bit more to get this model over its predecessor. Now, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what do you think about this monitor and about this review. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and see you in the next one. Bye!